All right, hello everyone. Sorry for the delay. We will get started shortly. Um, can we get a note taker volunteer for today? All right, anyone able to help us take notes for the Httpbis session today? Yaroslav, can you do it? Thank you. All right. All right, we'll get started in just a moment here. Just getting things set up. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first session of Httpbis. Unfortunately, we do not have Mark with us right now, so I'll be running this today. Before we begin, as you've likely seen in other sessions, here is the note well. These are the terms and conditions and policies under which we participate within the Ietf. Make sure that you are aware of the requirements here for disclosing IPR, et cetera, as you're participating. Also, this includes our code of conduct and how we treat each other. And this is a group where we have good collaborative interactions, and we like to keep it that way. Thank you all. All right, so I'll bounce over to our agenda. Yes, sharing the screen. Okay. So we already have gotten a note taker. Thank you, Yaroslav. If we need any backup, it would be great if other people can check out the notes as well and help fill things in. So we're going to be meeting twice this week. We're meeting right now, and then we'll also be meeting on Friday. So today we're going to go through the query method, connect TCP, optimistic HTTP upgrade security considerations, resumable uploads, and secondary certificates. And then on Friday, we'll be covering no-very search and incremental HTTP messages. These are our current active adopted documents, and then we also will have some new work being discussed on Friday. Is there any agenda bashing? Please, Francesca.
Just on, I wanted to add the status update for the cookies document that is with me.
Yes, thank you.
So if we can take just 2 minutes now. It's blocked with one discuss, and it's a really easy discuss to fix. And I've talked to the authors, but I don't know if they're online or if the shepherd knows this shepherd is not here, but knows what's happening and why it hasn't been updated.
Okay. I don't know. Do we have any of the cookie authors here? Yes, great. Do you want to comment, or do you have any status
So
updates
the point
there?
is that if we can get an update before, like as soon as possible before Wednesday, we can move it, like approve it, be done with it. Otherwise, we'll lose the ballots and it will be a little bit, it might be a little bit longer. Okay,
Great.
awesome. Thank you.
All right. Let's see if we can process this by the end of the session. It's a challenge. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up, Francesca. I guess also thank you, Francesca, for having been our AD. We appreciate all of the help and effort you've done. And I think, Mike is taking over as a responsible AD for Httpbis. So welcome, Mike. Great to have your continued participation just in another form. Right, you'd be here anyway. Great, all right. With that, let's get into the main part of the agenda. Julian, are you with us? Yes.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Hello.
The plan was that Make is doing the slides.
Okay.
So it's great to have the AD doing them. The soon to be.
Well, the soon to be AD. This
Yeah.
last chance.
I thought I did. Okay. Got slides controls. Okay. Third time's the charm. Query. There we go. All right. Okay. So the query method document is just about done, we think. We've had a couple of updates. We've had lots of examples, editorial fixes that Julian has been working on. Basically, all of the non-editorial stuff is resolved. We think we're headed to working group last call pretty soon. Stuff that we've done recently. We have one issue that we talked through. We've done some rearrangement of the authors and contributor list on the document. But after we hash this one out, we're hopefully ready for working group last call. So the issue that we want to talk about a little bit is the question about URL parameters tucked in alongside the query method, which also has a body containing, we've stopped calling them parameters in the body now, but containing payload. What does it mean when you combine them? And more to the point, when we give you a location header to go fetch the results again in the future, what does it mean if you pass parameters to that thing, or does it? Yeah, I think pretty much any resolution here is sensible. We just need to say something in the draft, whether it's don't do that or private agreement with the server or whatever else. We need to say something. So if you look at the example here, if you do a query and you pass it x equals y as part of the URL, and then it interprets that as part of your payload. So see here, there's a variable insertion as the body is find something that contains X. And then you get a location header back. Are you getting that location URL, or does that accept and understand the thing that was passed to the original query? It's a little weird. Martin, I see you're in the queue.
Yeah, can you go back? I think that first example is a really good one to sort of sharpen this point.
Okay.
So if you look at that one, there is a resource, and that resource is the lookup with the X and Y on it, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sending the payload of that message to that resource to have it perform a query. Now, the fact that it refers to the identity of the resource in that query is something that anything can do. And so I would say that this is not something that needs special handling.
Okay.
The fact that you're using question marks and x is equals y and whatnot in the construction of the URL doesn't really matter very much to HTTP. It may matter to some implementations of some servers that choose to interpret it in particular ways. But
okay.
as far as HTTP is concerned, this entire URL is the identity of the resource, and that's what matters in this case. So I think that as long as you're crisp about that, I think that's probably the most sensible thing to say here.
Thank you. That is a helpful distinction. I can't. Oh, Ben?
Hi. So I think, first of all, is that supposed to be a 200 or a 3xx?
I think it is a 200 because query defines that if you pass back a location header, that you can use that URL to repeat the query in the future without resending the body of the query.
Okay.
So it's a 200 that says, by the way, your results are here. Your results can be reobtained here in the future.
Okay. So I think another point then is that the meaning of the location header should probably be consistent across 200 and 300 responses.
No. So the location header's interpretation is specified to depend on the method and the status code in base HTTP.
Okay. But like making them different should have a clear reason, at least, right? So I think I agree with Martin that, that this is how HTTP works. I just want to point out that there is a case where this makes us sad, and that is with Doe is an example of this, but it's really a very general pattern where HTTP redirection basically doesn't work with Doe. You can't effectively serve 3xx responses for Doe, and that's because every query that comes back is going to generate a different URL, which means you're going to have to follow that redirect over and over again. And it would really be nice if there were a way to say, this is a path level redirect, excluding query params.
If there were something like perhaps query scope alt service that we.
Right, for example. Okay, but I agree with Martin that that's the normal interpretation.
Julian?
Hi, good morning. I'm not surprised with what Martin said because that's the obvious thing, how it needs to be defined. And I agree that we can't really change that part and that we really don't want to change that part, but it still leaves the question open. If you go back to the first example, is this legal? Can a query interaction between clients and servers work like that? And if it is, we are saying the resource that is identified in the query is whatever the URI is.
Right.
So I don't think we can disallow that. It's just something that happens to work or not to work depending on the media type. So if we get there and do the send back the location header, what does it mean for the client? I think we have two choices here, and one is the, let's say, conservative interpretation. The server redirected you to something, and whether you can parameterize that or not is up to you and your agreement with the server.
So I think what I took away from Martin's comment is that if these parameters are part of the URI, then it gave you a new URI in the location header that doesn't contain any parameters. Therefore, we haven't said anything about passing parameters to that new resource. That would be a different resource. And the server might have defined its layout such that a resource can be inferred to exist, but I don't think at the HTTP level we say anything about that. You think that's a fair resolution?
Yes, I think that makes sense, which means that we have one little remaining issue. Do we want to say something about that in case somebody comes up with the same question? Do we need yet another example? So I think this is something that needs a bit of thinking, and we probably can't solve that right now, but it would be nice if we came to a conclusion soonish so that we can finish work.
Yeah. Yeah, whether we need an example or not, I think just an aside that query params are not a separate part of the URI for HTTP purposes would address this. So if we have
So, yeah, sorry, one final sentence about that. What is related to this question is terminology. I got rid of several instances where we set query parameters, where we actually meant the query. I think we could make the spec a bit more clearer if we actually said what the query is. And I think the answer is it's the payload of the query request. But we should go through the spec and make sure that every time we say query or query payload or parameters, it's really what we want to say.
Yes. I think we should do a sweep of that terminology and make sure we're not confusing it. Okay. And once we resolve that, we'll be asking for a working group last call.
Great, and I guess for timing on that, prior to next IETF meeting?
Yes.
Great, okay, so let the notes.
Much sooner.
Yes, great, okay. Looking forward to that. Thank you for the work and the discussion. Excited to get this out the door.
Yes.
Oh, Rahul?
Hi, Rahul Gupta. One concern I have with the query is the accept query only specifies the format. And if you're restricted by what parameters you can send in the payload for making the query, I mean, your subset of things that you can do in the query is maybe much lesser than what a format might allow. Do you have any way of providing that information in accept query or?
Not particularly, unless you defined a more narrowly scoped media type. So what we decided with query was to do essentially the same contract that Post already has, that the resource defines what the input and output look like, and the client is assumed to have some knowledge of that before it's making the request, which is really no different than posting something today. You can say that your content type is JSON, but JSON can be anything. You have to know when you make the post to the API what type of JSON object it's looking for.
So the reason I asked is because with query parameters per se, you kind of have those, you can only have certain parameters, and whereas the payload can essentially be anything.
If you're talking about the part of the URL after the question mark, you can put anything there as well. It might be ignored by the server.
Yeah, exactly. So would the same happen with query when I put a query payload if I put something that the server does not recognize?
I don't think that's defined by HTTP. That's handled at a higher application level. So by the same logic, if you put well, if I pass that x equals y to an HTTP server as a post or a get, it might error out because it doesn't know what x is, or it might ignore x.
Okay, so that means you're essentially, if you want to define that information, you'll have to define a new media type in this case.
If you want it to be completely structured, probably, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. And Mideko tells me we have a little problem, so if you can end slides.
Okay. Do we have a, oh, I see. Oh, great. Thanks, Mideko. All right. Thank you both. So next up, we have Connect TCP. Ben. Yes. Oh, you're asking to share slides. I will let you do that. Awesome. Hello.
Hello. All right, let's talk about Connect TCP. So Connect TCP is this thing again, where you can do something like HTTP connect, but you encode the destination using a URI template similar to Connect UDP, extremely similar to Connect UDP, and now even more similar because in the latest version of the draft, we've removed the support for non-capsule transports. So the only way that you do this is using the capsule protocol, very much like Connect UDP. That's the only thing that's happened in this draft revision. The one interesting thing to talk about here is signaling fin versus reset. So when you have a TCP connection, TCP connections can end cleanly with a signal at the end that says, you've gotten all the data I was planning to send. They can end uncleanly with a timeout or a reset. And it would be nice to be able to convey this. HTTP Connect defines how you convey this. It's in HTTP 1.1, it's not very well specified, but in HTTP 2 and 3, it's specified as a stream error on the relevant request stream. So the current text basically extends the HTTP Connect approach and says, if the stream closed cleanly with no errors, then that's fin. If you got some kind of error, like a stream error or a TCP reset or a TLS fatal alert or a capsule that was malformed, truncated in the middle, then that was bad and call that a reset. That makes the receive logic really easy. You have to have error handling for these cases anyway. It's pretty hard to send a broken capsule. I tried sending a TLS alert when I was prototyping this. It's pretty hard to send a TLS fatal alert in most server implementations. So we have some other proposals here. And we need to make a decision about how we encode this. So one option would be a new capsule type that means this is the last data capsule, final data. If you get it, then you're good. If you don't see that, then it must have been cut off. Reset. And Kazuho and Piotr raised some other ideas for how you might do this. I expanded on those a little bit to try to explain some other options here, but basically we need to pin this down. Okay, Kazuho.
Right. So sorry, I didn't respond on this, but I think my position is that we don't really need the final data capsule because it's just a waste compared to just sending a fin. And I've seen discussions like probably we can use fin data to send something. Fin data allows us to send something after fin data, like the bandwidth information that has been collected. But if we are to do that, instead of closing the stream right after sending the fin data, then there's a question of when to retire the stream, and those complexities become aware. So I'd probably say that until we find that kind of use case, we should postpone defining something like fin data and rely on fin for closing the stream.
Okay, so it sounds like you're arguing more or less for the status quo, where we rely on the transport shutdown to tell us whether we got all the data or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, Mike Bishop, I was actually going to say that the status quo makes sense, at least for H2 and H3. But then that scenario of wanting to send something after the connection has closed and just have a place to tuck it, that is actually kind of persuasive for having an end frame there, because you might still want to deliver that after the connection was interrupted, and you can't use the transport layer signal of aborting the stream and reliably deliver information at the tail end of that stream. So I'm in the odd position of coming up to say what Kazuho said, and he convinced me otherwise. But yeah, but if we don't have that scenario that we want to leave room for in the future, H1 is really the only case where the stream level doesn't solve this for you. So how much do we care? And do we think we need that scenario in the future? I don't have good answers to that, but I think that helps frame the question.
I hear there's something called HTTP3 reliable reset in the works. Is that connected to your comment, maybe?
Well, in that this would experience the same problem, because so the reliable reset is essentially saying the stream was aborted, but I still need you to deliver the data. And if you had reliable reset, then you could deliver that information.
Exactly.
Or we could structure this so we don't need an extension that doesn't exist yet.
David Skenazy, capsule enthusiast. So it's one of those things that's a little tricky because it's really about the future and predicting it is hard. But I think I'm with Mike here because let's say I can see like the point of adding capsules here is for the future. It's to allow us to add some more information. Like wrap up is kind of the one we have today, but I'm sure we'll have more. And if you want to do something like, let's say, close the stream, but then say, here, let me give you a report on how I felt about this transfer, performance information, whatnot. If you don't have some way to convey end data, what you end up doing is you send your data and then you delay all that other information and then you close the stream. But that could mean that the other side is kind of unable to process the graceful shutdown until then. So my thinking is that it would be good to have end data or FIDL data. At the end of the day, they're roughly the same spelling. It doesn't matter. Data with a fin bit is slightly more efficient, but shrug. So I think that would be useful. I don't think there's a need necessarily for a capsule to do reset because like an abortive thing you could do there, but I'd be fine with that. Let's not do TCP flags data. There's no point in sending the urgent flag if you're not sending the urgent offset. So I'd say let's not do that. But the other two, I think I would prefer.
Okay. I jumped in queue just to kind of clarify things. I see, Kazuhu's going to come up again. So I'm hearing that, there are some very legitimate cases like, okay, we want to send some extra data along, but here's how cleanup went. And, this reminds me of cases I've seen where people do this with trailers at the end of some OHTTP chunks or something like that. It's like, okay, here's how stuff went. That's nice to have. And I think the design where we're saying that there's a final, like an end of stream capsule that can be separate from a capsule that delivers information makes sense. What does that though require from this document? So like, if we shipped this document without a final data capsule, then people who do not, who speak this document but don't know any of the other extensions of other capsules, if you get the closed stream, you would close the stream. And then a future document, if it defines here's this extra data in there, then if you understand that capsule, it can also define around that time whatever closed mechanism is appropriate, and then you can understand them both together. Do we have a case where you don't yet understand or support or negotiate this other information, but you still get some benefit out of some signaling capsule here? Like, I agree that this makes sense as like the direction that we expect, but it doesn't seem to be harmful to define it later, and we may do a better job of defining it later when we understand the other requirements.
Kazuhoko, let me, I think I agree with what Paul said just now, and let me give you another example. With just defining final data, saying that some metadata can be put after that, which is a good thing in general, the receiver of final data cannot close the stream forever. That creates an attack vector where, the peer just sends final data and keeps this. Right, but the problem is that now we have this strange state machine where we expect something to happen, but we don't know what to do. And without defining how and when we should close it, it's kind of like messy, in my opinion.
I don't think that's an attack. I do think, it's a little bit of a less than ideal state machine, but if there were an actual attack here, it would be just as easy to not send final data and not close the stream and just leave the connection open, as far as the client is concerned, or as far as the opposite end is concerned.
Yeah, the problem is, sorry, the problem is about the amount of resource that you have to hold on to, because the timeout is undefined. So it's like kind of like, how do you linger it? The problem.
Yes, I agree that there's a lingering state. I don't think it's a security concern, but it is messy. It could be annoying to implement.
Right. Anyway, so I think my point is that, probably we can delay this until when we define actually what to send.
So I just want to point out that in that approach, the extension that defines some kind of final data or equivalent has to be negotiated and changes the meaning of a stream error. So, or maybe changes the meaning of the absence of a stream error. So it has to be negotiated and accepted and acknowledged before either side can start using it, which is a little different from most of our capsules, which are ignorable.
Yaroslav Rosamaho. I think that this is having a way to signal end of data, end of transmission with a flag, fin, RST, or maybe some auxiliary metadata, what exactly happened, why the connection was reset is super useful, and the ability to provide additional metadata about the connection after connection is closed within the same stream is very useful. And then in terms of attack surface, well, obviously that is a security consideration to have, but it's up to implementers to decide how stressed they are and how much time would they give for the other party to finish the communication before killing the stream and before it becomes a DOS problem.
So Yaroslav, we do in the status quo have this ability, right? Because we have the ability to say that this stream closed cleanly versus the sender closed this HTTP stream with an error. Is that sufficient in your view?
There could be cases when I want to signal additional information. For example, it was RST versus I had to shut down my proxy server because of some event happened, because something happened with routing. There are cases when I might want to signal additional information other than FIN or RST. And then again, as few highlighted before me, having an ability to send within the same stream after connection was closed some status information, quality of service, end user survey, whatever it is very useful ability.
No, and I think the end user survey is a great example because it's asynchronous. To disagree with a few of the points made before, I think, yeah, I don't see the messiness or the security aspect, because the way I would implement this is, let's say we don't do this. The way you implement it is when you get data capsule, you shove it into your socket, and then when you get the stream fin, you close that socket. And you also tear down your stream machinery. What you would implement it with this is you get your final data, you do that, you don't set any timers. And then when you get the stream fin, you close the stream. Like there is nothing to do here. You might want a timer for this stream has been open for too long, but you need that regardless of final data or not. The fact that the stream stays in this, I closed the socket over there, but I didn't close the same machinery is not a problem at all. So it's not a security issue and it's not a reliability issue. So I don't see any of that complexity there. On the point of doing this later, I think that's a reasonable one. I think it's not, depending on how we do it later, we might not necessarily need to negotiate it, because final data would need to be negotiated, because otherwise, if you send final data, the other side would drop it on the floor and not get that data. If you just had end data, you could add that unnegotiated later. That would actually work. So at the end of the day, it's like all the strong arguments one way or another are very weak. Hence, it makes it hard to make a decision. I think I'm still landing on it'd be better to add this one bit. But I don't think there's any strong argument either way.
Mike Bishop. So David, let me tell you why you're wrong on that. And to Tommy's point about what breaks if we don't do this now. So the problem is that hypothetical server that doesn't understand this extension when we do it in the future. It says, I get the end of the stream, that's a clean close. I get a reset stream, that's an abrupt close, we're gonna close it. Then we define this extension that we say you don't have to negotiate, you don't have to know, we'll just drop it on the floor. Now we're cleanly closing the stream all the time. Now we're cleanly closing the socket all the time.
We lose the reset signal.
Yeah. Well, we lose the reset signal unless we take a dependency on reliable reset, which is the other path.
Or we make this extension fully negotiated and acknowledged.
Hold on, just a clarification. I'm not understanding why there's any relationship or dependency on reliable reset. The point of reliable reset is that it allows you for, oh, I get it. I get it. All right, sorry.
So,
right. So, sorry, that took me a little longer than it should have, where, yeah, if you want to send if you don't have reliable reset and you don't negotiate, then your reset might lose some data. But that's actually fine. So you could totally do this without the negotiation, without reliable reset. It would just be weaker than doing it here with something in a capsule. Because conceptually, if there is a reset on the TCP stream, the semantics of TCP are that, hell, if I know what happened to the data, so trying to use reliable reset here is not really needed. It would be a, no, but I got this data, but the other side is like, right, it's a shrug. So.
Now, what you want reliably delivered is the information that the proxy would be sending afterward.
The reset frame at the quick layer is delivered reliably. It's retransmitted.
Yeah, but this is stream data on that stream. The hypothetical statistics about the connection frame or capsule that comes after. And so I think the concern there is, no, we potentially make it harder or require a dependency on reliable reset to build this in the future. Whereas if we define it now, it's just part of the semantics and we can build it in the future or not, and we're fine. I think it's just easier if we shove it in there.
We do have Peter in the queue. Go ahead.
Piotr Sikora. So the reason this discussion came to be is that currently the draft says that HTTP2 and HTTP3 senders may use an incomplete data capsule, which was basically a malformed data capsule to signal, a reset or other unclean shutdown. And this is still in the current version of the draft. So this was solution to this problem. And I don't think it was changed since then. I also don't really see any downside in defining this. One of those, clean errors compared to not doing it.
Great. Kazuho, and then Lucas.
So regarding the point of using a reliable reset and to signal a reset as well as sending some metadata, the problem occurs when you know that you want to reset, but you don't know the size of the metadata that you are going to send. Because at the point you decide to reset, you have to know the size. So there are those kind of messy things that happen. So that's one of the other reasons for why I used to propose to just punt this to a later moment. But anyway. I mean, to punt designing this mechanism until a later moment where we know what we want, what we want to set. Yep.
It would be negotiating. Okay. Lucas.
Hello. I think I find it hard to believe if we punt now we'll have any more information to help make a decision. We're having a decent discussion now, and I just think we've got context paged in, and there's not that much more to know. Like we've all built servers, we all have TCP proxying servers already. This is an extension of that stuff. Like I'd rather spend a bit more time to do like just pick something or decide like we're not going to work on this, and then if there's a compelling reason to open up that kind of worms, fine. But I'd hate to be here in like 2 years time going, why didn't we just add a flag rather than like now we need to do extension negotiation. Like my experience has told me like it's really hard to put that horse back in the stable. So if we could avoid it now without too much pain and delay, like that would be my preference. I don't have enough of the technical detail in my head right now to comment better. So I'll go away and look at the ticket and see if I can put a comment. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so Ben, you're holding the pen here. What do you want to do? Because I think a lot of this comes down to partly, writing the text, getting the things right in the document. My impression is that implementation of this is not too bad. I think we all make sure that if we do have people who are planning on implementing this, that whatever we end up with, they're willing to implement. But I think it's like it's a writing job here. So what do you think?
It seems to me like the support really is between the current state and the text in PR number 2949. So there's not even any writing to do. It's just a decision to make. I think that we should set a deadline here and ask people to get all their thoughts in on number 3000 in a time window and see if we can make some kind of consensus call.
Show of hands for. Yeah, I think I'm okay with just seeing this kind of come to more discussion on the issue. If we have a real hard time converging, that's fine. But I haven't heard particularly strong opinions of like things are going to be totally broken if we do it one way or the other. It's more a judgment call of, can we predict the future correctly? Are we going to regret doing this? Are we going to regret not doing this? Do we have to negotiate it later? But none of them are make or break here. I guess also, Ben, if there's a solution you prefer, if you think you would prefer to do something here, if we have some like proposed text of like, this is what it could look like, that may help crystallize consensus of people saying like, yes, this looks good, or no, this wasn't worth it after all.
Yeah. So what I'll say about that is that in HTTP 1.1, in Go, I found this unimplementable. The TLS library doesn't let me send a TLS alert. The TCP implementation doesn't let me force a reset. Like I couldn't figure out how to propagate this error and avoid bleaching it. And maybe there was some tricky way. I think I tried something with socket options eventually that maybe worked, but it's not straightforward there. And so that was something that pushed me toward wanting final data. That was before the capsule thing. With capsules, you can do this by injecting a capsule syntax error. But if you have a capsule library, it probably won't let you inject a capsule syntax error. So that's what pushes me.
Can I ask a quick clarification question on what you mean by a capsule syntax error?
So I think the only capsule syntax error is truncation.
Oh, so you mean intentionally sending an invalid capsule to cause the other side to flip out?
Right. To force an error on the other side so that it then propagates the reset.
Oh, because if you reset the stream, if you reset,
because you can't reset. There's no stream.
The terminator
There's no
won't
stream
forward
to. It should, but there's no stream to reset in HTTP 1.1 other than
right.
TCP or TLS.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree that sending a malformed capsule is not the way to go.
Okay. Kazuo?
Kazuo, just want to say that I won't die on this. So if others feel strongly of doing this, then I won't oppose. That's all.
Okay.
And the point that I was actually in Q4 was, I think, like I agree with time boxing, but at the end of the day, the real time boxing for this, the blocker for working with last call is going to be implementations. And I feel a little bit bad because I've been meaning to implement it for the last however months. It's literally shows up on my to-do list every few weeks, and I will get to it, I promise. But I would say if we put, what I would recommend is we put this in and then we implement. And if during implementation turns out to be a pain, we just rip it out. Or if during, Ben writing the PR for it, it turns out to be also gross, we can rip it out. But I would say that could be a reasonable path forward. So that's what I would suggest.
All right. Did you have anything more, Ben, on this one, or should we move on to your
Let's,
next
we can
slide.
move. There is no next slide. This is final slide.
Sorry. I mean, sorry. No, to your next presentation, which is also you. You're to the next topic.
Yes. Okay.
Next slides. I think the plan, which I was hearing, was let's have a bit more discussion in the issue over the coming couple of weeks and see if we can converge a bit more there. And if we don't, then we can elevate it up and try to have a consensus call on the list or something like that. But I think we can figure this out together.
Just like, I don't think we need that much more discussion on this. I think just seeing the PR with
Yes,
this,
yeah, I think
and
that
then we'll have
helps.
discussion on it when we can see it.
Yeah.
Like, is that a reasonable next step? Ben, are you okay with writing the PR that has the extra information?
It's PR number 2949.
Yes, sorry, I reviewed it a long time ago. All right, well, great, sold, I'll review it again.
Okay. Or are you asking? Sorry.
All right. Security considerations for optimistic protocol transitions. This was previously called optimistic upgrade, but in the prior draft, we added discussion of HTTP Connect, which in HTTP 1.1 has the same class of problems, which is that if the client and server somehow get into a disagreement about whether the request has succeeded or failed, very bad things happen. So for this draft, one thing that I did is I just did this very simple thing. I grepped GitHub for this regex, and I found a bunch of clients that actually do, sorry, I should step back. So there's been some discussion back and forth, like, does anybody actually have this problem? Is this a real problem where like the client ignores whether the request succeeded or failed? And we had this idea circulating in the working group that maybe there were clients that were essentially very highly performance optimized. And so they send a connect request, they don't wait for the 200, they immediately send the first flight TCP data, kind of like false start. They assume that they're going to get a 200 back. And so I said, well, maybe I can find like kind of broken clients like this if I just go looking. And I looked around and I found actually a bunch of clients that sure enough send data without checking the status code. Actually, I think they all still wait for the response. So it's not a performance optimization. It's just kind of careless assumption that like, there's a status code here, but I'm not going to look at it. It's got to be a 200. Anyway, that tells us that this is a real thing. And that sort of convinced me that we need to expand our recommendations a little bit about what proxy servers can or should do about clients with this behavior. And there were some other suggestions that got incorporated here. And so this is the full text of the section. This is the only thing that has changed in this revision of the draft. I just copy and pasted the whole section. The important thing here is that, first of all, if you're a client and you send connect, you have to wait for the 200 response before actually starting to use the proxy in HTTP 1.1. And then the proxy server may close the connection if it rejects the request. Both of these things are maybe clarifications, maybe restatements of kind of standard HTTP 1.1 in my view. And if you don't like, and if this is a problem, use HTTP 3 or 2. So we have one open issue here, which is about this may. And so it says, proxy servers may close the connection, but Martin Thompson points out that may doesn't do very much here for security, and must would actually be required if you're serious about closing this vulnerability. I think must would first of all require an update to the HTTP 1.1 spec. It would also create a bunch of fairly serious performance issues where if you have, the great majority of clients that are correctly implemented would suffer however many three additional round trips on an HTTP 407 proxy authentication requested, just to try to mitigate this small fraction of vulnerable clients. So this could be a must, if that's acceptable, or it could be a should, and then we have to decide when. And you could imagine saying like use some user agent sniffing to identify bad clients, or like think carefully about the purpose of your deployment, whether you are going to have this kind of problem. So this is the number one thing that I want to discuss here. Tommy?
Tommy Jensen. I would personally be a fan of promoting this from May for the reasons you were discussing, but I think should is fine. I would say that you mentioned on the previous slide that, saying that anything other than 200 will then close causes a problem for 407. Why not just carve out an exception for 407, given we know that's the one return code that's going to be really common where we expect a follow-up from the client, meaning you should, as a server, close this when you return anything other than 200 or 407.
So carving out 407, I think, doesn't close the vulnerability. The server sends a 407. It doesn't then know whether what it's looking at is actual content from the client or forwarded client potentially from an attacker.
Fair. I guess what I'm saying is it seems like this requirement is being a good citizen on behalf of clients who aren't doing their job. And in the case of 407, we're doing that at the expense of, how are we expecting, if we're going to say that, what guidance are we giving for the 407 case where we're saying we want your auth connection closed and we're expecting the calls back?
So the implication with a must would be you send the 407, you close the connection, the client tries to send another request, finds that there's no connection, and sets up a new connection and resends the request with the appropriate authentication request headers.
Okay. I need to think more about that, but definitely promotion from May, I think is a good idea.
So you talked about the performance one, and then you talked about proxy authentication. And I think in the proxy authentication case, there's no forwarding that's going to be implied at that point, is there? So how does the proxy in that scenario distinguish between the request and the payload of the request and then the subsequent request anyway? So if you're rejecting and there's payload, then the payload is the next request, not.
It's supposed to be. The concern is, what if the concern is that some small fraction of clients will ignore that 407, they'll assume they got a 200, and they'll start forwarding payload for somebody else who might be an attacker itself.
Right.
And so you have request smuggling.
So I think, as you say, if it means another connection establishment, most of the clients that I'm aware of tend to make lots and lots of connections to things like proxies. And so the outright cost here is potentially bad in that all of those connections hit a 407, but it's also potentially good in that the first request that they make into that connection pool gets them a 407, and they already have a connection to the proxy pool that they can send the next request on when that first one goes away.
So I want to just clarify, do you think that are you advocating for a must or should?
am
And do you think
advocating
we're
for must.
updating one? Okay. And do you think that this updates HTTP 1.1?
Sure, why not? I mean, what we're doing is we're talking about connect. We decide whether or not it says whether it updates 9112. We can, and maybe we should, just so that people know that it has been updated and they should probably read this document.
This is not bad.
Yeah. David.
David Skenazy, it's me again. Yeah, I first got up to say what Martin was saying, like anyone reading 9112 and Blend Connect should read this too. So I think we should update it no matter what. And updating it is cheap. So I would say that. Then the next thing is performance regression is in H1. Don't care. If you care about performance, use H2 or H3. So that to me points to must as well.
All right, anyone else? Should we move on?
Okay. It sounds to me like it sounds to me like there's a lot of interest in strengthening this. Most comments, plurality of comments favors a must. Personally, I would lean to at least putting in a carve out for servers that essentially know something about their client pool. You don't have to do this if you are pretty confident that your clients are not vulnerable. But I will go write some text for review. Yaroslav?
Yaroslav Rosamahom, I would be very careful with must. I think should is the right balance. I've seen clients that are not happy if they receive 4 or 7 and then connection interrupts. They expect the authentication within the same connection. There are some wonky NTLM schemes that violate various standards, but are still out there in the wild. So, I mean, if we do must, it could break things for people, and people would have to violate this. So let's go with should. It feels that should is a better balance.
Okay, like the last conversation, I'm not sure that this is fully closed.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? David?
I mean, at the end of the day, a should, like the latest ISG guidance, and I think they've just published a new ISG statement about that, is that anytime you write a should, you have to explain when it's a good idea to not follow the should. And I really don't want us to write, unless you care more about performance than security. So, you know, maybe this is more of a must, but we know you won't. Like as in we put in must, and if someone wants to shoot themselves in the foot, we're not going to stop them.
Right.
Yeah.
With you're already dealing with like problematic edge cases.
Okay, I will take a look at the new ISG statement. As all, I'm not sure there's a material difference here, so let's call this editorial, and we will come up with some stronger guidance here.
I mean, I don't think we can call the normative language change editorial.
I'm not convinced. It seems to me that we have removed all the difference. Once you have to specify why you make the decision, should and must are the same. But that is off topic for Httpbis.
And I guess also since I think everyone else I was hearing come up to the mic was saying for must, because you're also like, would you mind if it said must, acknowledging that there will be people who won't necessarily follow that must because they have other things they care about.
As long as we don't put that acknowledgement in the spec.
Right.
Yeah, I just got up to say that Francesca put a link to the ISG statement in the chat for the meeting. And
Thank you.
I don't know, like Yaroslav or anyone else, like, I mean, could you live with it being a must? He says, sure, okay. So I don't know. If
Okay,
if we think
that's
the right
helpful.
choice, we can go for it. Yeah. Working group, let's go. Well played.
Yeah, we've got one more. Okay. Well, we'll try working group last call soon.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Ben, for all of that. Next, we're going to have resumable uploads, and then after that, we're going to do secondary certs. Marius. And do you want to present from your end?
Yes, I can, I think, ask slides.
There we go.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. This is a brief update and presentation about resumable uploads, the draft where we try to make uploads perform a little bit better in case of errors and interruptions. Just before this, I think 2 weeks ago, we released draft iteration 6, which is mostly a major editorial overhaul, as we talked about in the last IETF meeting in Dublin. So we restructured it. It now has more section talking about the upload resource, which is like the main entity that provides resumable uploads. We also adjusted the use of HTTP terminology, so it's much clearer on, like, it integrates better with existing HTTP structures. And also we removed a lot of restrictions, so it's a lot less restrictive now and just talks about the stuff it actually has to do. Besides these editorial overhauls, we also made a few normative changes just to make it a bit more seamless. The expires limit is now renamed to max age to better fit existing terminology in HTTP. Responses when appending to an upload no longer have to include the upload offset and upload limit header because they're not needed for the uploading process itself. But they now should include the upload complete header so that clients can, in particular in error responses, distinguish whether it's an error related to the uploading itself or to the processing of the uploaded resource representation, sorry. And we also added a problem type for inconsistent length values, which is now nice because now we have problem types for all upload-specific error cases. So if implementations want to use that, they can now use the problem type everywhere. Since the slides were made, we also published a 7th iteration, but it's just a few minor details, some rewording in the introduction, some reference updates, and some examples that have been corrected. So nothing substantial there, but there's a 7th draft now as well. So that's the past. What's next? Currently, looking at our GitHub, there's only one issue open. There was an editorial issue before that, but it's now closed. So now it's only one issue. And as far as I know, there has been no other comments on the mailing list so far. So there's one issue that I would like to briefly discuss here. And then maybe we can consider what's next for this document. But first, let's get into that issue. It's about the method for appending representation data. So to give a bit of context, resumable uploads work that when an upload is started, the server creates an upload resource. And when the client wants to resume an upload because it was interrupted, for example, it queries that upload resource asking how much data it received. And then it basically just appends the remaining representation data. It works totally fine. The current draft uses the patch method with a application partial upload media type. This is what the draft currently uses. But on the mailing list, there was one comment saying, this isn't really the best method to use. It should be post instead. because semantically it would suit better. It's not really a patch. You don't really apply a diff. So the question is now how other people feel about this. There has been some discussion in a GitHub issue about this, but I don't really see strong opinions in either way, either in keeping the current patch plus media type thing, or moving to post, or maybe even put. There was even some discussion about patch plus another media type that's more generic and less specific to resumable uploads, maybe something like application/append data that then can be reused for other protocols where you're just appending data, but not really in a resumable upload way. So yeah, that's one question to the room to see if there's any strong opinion on that. One comment maybe about this is backwards compatibility is not really a concern. Like with partial put, the client can't really assume that the server supports it. But in that case, we don't really have that issue because the server indicated the upload resource to the client. So it knows that this is an upload resource and the server should then properly handle those requests. So maybe it's more just about semantics. And I'm curious to hear if we're fine with keeping what we currently have or if we should adjust to a more semantically suiting method.
Mike Bishop. So put generally is interpreted as you're replacing the entire resource, which we definitely are not doing. So I would say not put. Post means that these semantics are defined by the resource that you're posting it to, which this is a dedicated resource for the partial upload. So I think that's reasonable. Patch means that you are modifying the resource that already exists there, which this is also reasonable. I think either of the post or patch spellings are fine, not put. Having a more generic media type to describe what type of diff are you applying, you're appending. That's fine. I really don't care what we call the media type, although I think that is probably more accurate. Just not put.
Lucas.
Hello. So yeah, Roy made this comment on the list and we opened the issue, and back in November I was like, I can't, like, this goes back, and if you look at the issue, there's a discussion kind of looking at the history of why we even picked this method in the first place and how we got to where we are now, and that all seems fairly well thought out, and I think it was a fine question to ask, but I think we should just go with what we've done and what people have implemented now, because there's no good reason to change based on the path we took to get to where we are today. I'm not against change if there's good motivating factors, but yeah, like we have a type already, and like everyone seemed happy with that. Can we just say we're going to stick with it?
We're getting choppy, Lucas. Starting to lose you. Maybe turn off video for a second. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's just close this and move on.
Perfect. That's something I can definitely live with. Good to hear that there's no strong opinion on change here. Then we'll just keep it as is and move on. Talking about moving on, at the last IETF meeting, I briefly talked a bit about how different clients in the ecosystem implement interim responses. And now I looked a bit at how proxies do it. So this is just more an informational slide. I think that was quite interesting. I looked in how different proxies forward 1xx responses from origins to the clients to get a feeling of issues that we might run into when we deploy this protocol in real world or outside of controlled test environments. And for that, I just simulated cases where the origin emitted a 103 and a 104, and then I looked at if the client actually received them. I chose those two different interim response codes because 103 is already known, some proxies might already have special cases for them, but the 104 is not used yet. So it's more of a new one, and we'll see how proxies handle new status codes for interim responses that they're not aware of yet. And the results are mixed. Apache, Squid, Nginx, HA proxy just passed it through without issues. Traffic server didn't forward 103, even though I saw some tests that it should. So maybe that's just my mistake and I implemented it wrong, or I used it wrong. For 104, it was really funny. It forwarded the interim response, but not the final response. So that's why you see the skull there. Caddy didn't forward anything, but I thought it should because some issues say it should. Maybe it's a bug. Maybe I did a mistake again. And Varnish just responded with a 503 when you give it an interim response. So I'm not sure if it supports that, but yeah, that didn't work out in the end either. So yeah, it just shows that the ecosystem is a bit mixed. This isn't technically, I think, a violation of the spec because proxies are allowed to drop interim responses. But this is more of an informational thing that, yeah, of issues that we may run into when people deploy this behind proxies. But yeah, I thought this was very interesting. I'm not sure if there's comments on those.
Yeah, just one thing briefly. There's one intermediary here that is probably worth noting, and that is the intermediary called fetch. And fetch passes 103, but not 104. I don't know if you've got that on the slides or something. But
you mean the fetch API and
yeah, the fetch API specifically recognizes 103, but it's the only 1XX response type that it recognizes. 100 continue is recognized and handled internally by browsers. 103 is special, but no other is forwarded.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, fetch is a bit of a special case because it doesn't have an API for interim responses. So I kind of assumed that it doesn't have any special handling, but it's good to know that there's some logic in there.
I thought we, Marius, I thought we're going to reach out to the fetch people, or we did already about this like a year or so ago. I don't know if you can recall.
I did. I opened an issue in the fetch specification GitHub repository, and I think it's stuck on waiting for implementer interest. So there's not much movement there. I'm not sure if we can try to push it a bit more, but an issue has been raised, but so far there hasn't been much movement on that topic, unfortunately. All right. So yeah, that's what I have currently, all the slides. Maybe going back to that one. So we can close the last open issue. And I think that's then mostly it. We have some running implementations showing that we have interoperability between clients and servers. So I'm not sure what's next. If we can look into a working group last call, or how do people feel about this? How about moving forward with this?
If anyone has thoughts or comments on implementation and readiness, please go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I mean, let's get this last issue done and we can process it. As we've seen so far, we have a number of things that are just about wrapping up. So I think this would be somewhere in that queue once we get things done. Lucas, please go ahead.
I mean, in terms of implementation, this is a standardized form of something that people do quite widely and in various shapes and forms. So this, I just want to make it clear to people, like, this isn't a brand new thing we've just invented. Like, it's a common use case, and we've come up with a solution we believe is fully compatible with HTTP semantics. And yeah, we have proxies that drop status codes and maybe explode. But we've already fought that battle with 103 and made some headway. Like let's keep it going and things like the fetch spec and trying to get stuff there. That I think slowly and surely we're improving the ecosystem. So like let's last call it, in my opinion. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you, Marius.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, we are going to be going over secondary certs. Eric is here. All right. Do you want to share? Yeah, great. Granting.
Hello, everybody. Let's talk about secondary certs. So the current status of the document, we have one, non-editorial issue still worth potentially chatting more about, which is regarding the breaking up exported authenticators into multiple frames to get around HTTP2's maximum frame size. There are some editorial improvements to be made and some remaining PRs to be landed for other non-editorial issues, but I thought I would primarily spend the time talking about this one. So on this one, as a brief refresher for what's going on here, the maximum frame size for H2 might not be enough for certain exported authenticators if they are sufficiently large. And so to get around this, there have been a number of solutions that we have discussed previously. Among some of the suggestions was potentially new stream type over H2, some continuation style solution, just specifying a total size up front and then sending it in chunks or compressing them. So far, the preferred solution that seems to have the most, or that seems the most agreeable is to just waive the maximum frame size for server certificate frames and allow them to be kind of arbitrarily large. This suffers some head of line blocking if the certs are large enough. On the flip side, it is substantially easier to work with. In most other regards, does not require too much extra engineering and kind of makes the parity nice with H3. So to the working group, are there any objections to just going this way for now? And we can revisit if, doing interop testing and whatnot, we find any problems.
Martin has opinions.
Can you say a little bit more about the stream option? Because I like streams for something like this.
Yeah, so I guess the angle there would be that we would have like a certificate stream over H2 that would have its own rules for receiving authenticator chunks in a kind of containerized way.
We could use server push. That didn't get a laugh? That didn't get a laugh? Oh, too soon, too soon.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that we could investigate more if we think it's worth adding the extra complexity.
I think having potentially very large chunks of stuff that suddenly arrive and seize up a connection, particularly early on in the life cycle of a connection, is unfortunate.
Yep.
And being able to properly prioritize the delivery of certificates against incoming requests that come in, for instance, is much easier if you're able to split them up. And I don't want to build a whole new system for anything. We have streams. And so the core challenge, I think, is sort of working out the stream lifecycle and how it fits in. But because we already have essentially solved the push stream thing in terms of state, it wouldn't be push. It wouldn't have all the same properties of push necessarily. You wouldn't necessarily want to put a resource identifier, like a URL against it and headers and all those sorts of other things. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But the stream state mechanics, as much as we probably, some people may have like delighted in removing all of that stuff, we have kind of worked out how to do it. And so it has all the right properties. So
Jonathan.
Jonathan Hoyland, Cloudflare. Sorry, I was just confused by what you said to Martin. We can't have a new stream because isn't it specifically defined to go on stream 0? Like the spec says do it on stream 0. Fair.
What, Mike, can you repeat what you said, Mike?
I said it's defined by us. We can change it.
Okay,
Yep.
right.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. Yep, we can change it.
Okay, Mike Bishop. Gosh, that option is actually somewhat compelling, in part because you could do the same thing in H3 because it also has unidirectional streams. But that basically means rewriting what it looks like. Continuation frames were bad in H2. Waiving the maximum frame size for a particular frame type is just continuation frames again as the same drawback. In fact, it's almost a little worse because if you have a properly layered frame parser, the frame parser is going to check whether you're compliant with the maximum frame size before you get to the part that looks at what the frame type is. And so like, probably it's all written by the same people. It's not like you're crossing library boundaries, but shoving the check whether this is over the size limit, unless it's this type, in which case don't care. Well, then you have to have a size limit for that. That's implementation specific.
Yeah, that is a good point, that functionally supporting this in implementations might actually require more churn than is necessary. So.
Whereas I think the piece of what Martin was saying, because this is an extension we have to negotiate up front, the server has not yet initiated any streams. And so even though the current spec says that all server initiated streams are push streams, nothing actually breaks, even if you're using push, nothing actually breaks if when you negotiate this extension, we now define that stream, what is it, 2 probably, now carries certificates. Okay. And you can do exactly the same thing in H3 by, there's a server initiated stream carrying certificates. And then you have the same definition for both versions. And we don't have to be protocol specific about it. I kind of like that idea. I also hate it, but I like it.
Yes, you would. Kazoo.
Kazuhoka, I think I have one question on what is the expected size or maximum size of this frame? Because if it's like 60K, maybe it's all right, but if it's like 10 meg, no. So.
I don't have a great answer as far as what the upper bound would actually be. It might, I mean, like partially just to keep things extensible into the future. I guess it wouldn't hurt to assume that it could be large enough that maybe it would cause a problem. So, I mean, it is worth finding a good solution to this.
If I can jump in for a second, assume it's roughly comparable to a server hello because it's carrying the same information. So we have server hellos that spill out of the initial send window for a new connection. They can be big. They're not multi-megabyte usually, but like several packets worth.
Yep.
Lucas.
I can't recall if this came up. The issue with continuation itself is it like the spec requires the whole connection to get blocked, like every other frame type. I don't think we want that kind of design here. If you mean just a thing that can span more than one frame, I mean, we have that design of like data frames and the payload of them spanning that. So I think that aspect could be designed for. What we don't want to do is enable the attack vectors like the continuation flood thing that we've seen. So if you did, again, you're going to have to like write the text, and I trust you could do that if that's where we're going. Although, you know, I like the idea of maybe using this as a Trojan horse to disabling server push entirely, but maybe that's reaching too far.
Okay, so it sounds like the next step here is going to be to investigate the new stream solution in a little more detail before we jump to any conclusions about what we want to do here. So that sounds good. Only other topic here. Wanted to make a call if regarding like implementation interest, since there's not too much more other than that previous topic. It would be good to know whether or who is interested in actually doing an implementation. You know, we have an implementation at Apple with you know, a client and a server, but ideally we would like to have more than that. So if you are interested in doing an implementation and doing interop testing, you know, would be good to hear from you. And of course, like, can also talk about it offline.
Thanks. Any hands of people who at least want to have some intent to do test implementation work? Crickets for now. Okay.
Okie dokie. Well, of course, like I said, if you want to talk offline as well,
yep,
should be good. Okay, cool. So anyway, that is it for now. We'll get moving here.
And for the previous issue that we were discussing with, you know, if we want to go down the route of having a separate stream, I guess for authors, are you comfortable? Do you think you'll be able to make good progress on that kind of prior to the next meeting? Would it be useful to have like others try to work out some of the design details there? Because I mean, there seem to be like a fair number of choices about how to do that elegantly. Okay. For those who are remote, Mike said that they would like some input. Is that something that we want to just handle kind of on list of like, hey, we're thinking of this direction? Okay. So let's try to have engagement and just, you know, please feel free to come to the list with here are the different directions we're thinking about, what makes sense, what's not. Like, let's do that early, often, just to make sure we can make progress on this and not let it languish. Okay.
All right, cool.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, everybody.
Okie dokie. And that is the end of our agenda for today. We will have some more topics on Friday. But otherwise, we're going to end a little bit early here, I think. Thank you all for the good discussion. And we will see you next time.